First off, the Atari Flashback 7. Now, this line of consoles has been kicking since 2004, around the era of plug-and-play arcade joysticks. AtGames released the 7 around the time of the NES Classic, and I gotta say, the Atari Flashback line ain't half bad. The console mostly resembles the Atari 2600 and includes 2600-like wireless controllers. Now, these I'm not super into, the wireless portion that is. These are IR-based, much like a TV remote, so you have to keep the controller pointed at the console at all times. That honestly takes a lot of the convenience out of wireless for me. I'd much rather them include wired controllers or spring for something like Bluetooth functionality. It'd make it more expensive, but I think it'd be worth it. Thankfully, you can use standard Atari controllers. The game selection here, well, it's definitely Atari. The Atari 2600 is one of the most iconic game consoles of all time, but the library just isn't that appealing in this day and age. A good amount of the games were never really that great. They were shovelware, and a good amount of games that were good back in the late 70s, early 80s aren't that good nowadays. But every so often, you run across a 2600 game that is fantastic. Breakout, Centipede, Space Invaders, there's a handful of gems here. The lineup as a whole is pretty hit or miss on the Flashback 7, but so was the 2600's library in general. We don't get any of the Activision classics on here like Kaboom or Pitfall, which is unfortunate, but we do get Atari-made classics and games that were never released. I think for people that grew up with the Atari or want a good idea of what exactly the 2600 was all about, the Atari Flashback series does everything it sets out to do. I don't think it'll capture the hearts and minds of everybody who plays it, but those who want to appreciate or experience gaming's past, the Flashback 7 does its job. It's still way cooler to play these games on a real 2600 though. Next up is another AtGames production, the Sega Genesis Classic Game Console. Now this is what you call a mini console. It gives off Sega Genesis 3 vibes in terms of the size, but doesn't really feel Genesis-y other than that. It comes with 2 wireless controllers which are molded after the 6-button Genesis pads. These definitely don't feel up to snuff with actual Genesis controllers and are also wireless in the same way as the Atari Flashback 7, so definitely plug in a Genesis controller if you have one laying around. This console comes with an actual Genesis cartridge slot, and while a bunch of games are included, if you boot this sucker up with a cartridge in it, you can play your existing Genesis games. Except you should never do that because this console is revolting. Mainly just in the sound department. It completely murders the sound in these games. Just take a listen. This is definitely the biggest problem with this console, the emulation. The video is fuzzy and the sound is atrocious. Other than that, it's okay. It does feel way too generic though, like the menu system feels like just a stock menu, no Sega flair or anything. Now the Atari Flashback was also made by AtGames, but I think it could get away with the lesser presentation. It was an Atari console, it made sense to go more basic with its presentation. They're very basic games, it makes sense. The Genesis had much more of a personality, so it's disappointing to not see that reflected in the system. But hold the phone, if you've had any doubts about this system, do I have news for you. The game's lineup is tolerable. You do get a solid taste test of the Genesis library with games like Comic Zone, Kid Chameleon, a few Sonic titles, and the Golden Axe games. While standout titles are omitted in this variant, such as Streets of Rage 1 through 3, Sonic the Hedgehog 3, and Echo the Dolphin. There exist multiple variants of this console though. This is the 2016 model and these games can be found on older models. But keep scrolling through that games list and you'll find out half the games library are bonus games that are low quality, cheaply made games that were just ported over to this console, or just rip-offs of more popular games. Yeah, not cool. Overall, the emulation is poor and the games lineup is padded to Kingdom Come. I do like that you can play actual Genesis cartridges on this thing. That's definitely something I wish the Atari Flashback did with 2600 games, but the quality of this product just simply doesn't meet the mark. For the everyday consumer who had a Sega Genesis as a kid, this is alright, but for everybody else, this thing is pretty bad. Analogy alert! The NES Classic is like a best-of compilation Blu-ray set of some beloved movies or a show remastered to perfection, while the Sega Genesis Classic Game Console is more like those $1 DVDs at Walmart with a bunch of decent stuff, but the quality is belch-worthy.